Kia ora koutou, everyone. Welcome to this long-term plan annual plan subcommittee meeting on the 17th of May. Great to have you all here. I will go through to our opening, we've got our emergency procedures on the screen. Please feel free to take a moment to note those. I'll move through to our opening karakia. Please feel free to join me. Whakatakata hau ki te uru, whakatakata hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā tara tara ki tai, kia te aki ana te atukura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, ti hei moriora. Thank you, everyone. So we'll move straight into apologies. So we have an apology from Councillor Morgan, and I believe we've got an apology from Councillor Brown for lateness. And other than that, we've got a full house. So I'll move those apologies. Over seconded, Councillor Briggs. All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Okay, moving through to our hearing of submissions. So just to make some introductory remarks of how today will work. So of course you'll have the schedule of speakers who will be presenting to us today, and you'll have an attached copy, which I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to read before today. And what we'll do is have everyone speak for their 5 minutes. We will just need to be mindful that, of course, we do have people coming in at certain times and expecting to be able to speak and go, or maybe if they've come from work. So we'll try and keep to those times as much as possible. We've got a little bit of leeway, and when we've got the ability for questions, we'll do that as well. But we'll just look to try and stick to the time so we can respect everyone else's times that they've got. Also, if you have anything that you would like officials to follow up, if you could please note that down, and we'll, at points in the day when we have a bit of a gap, which inevitably happens, we'll then just go around the room and raise those. So we won't be doing that after every submission, but at certain points we'll make sure they all get captured for any follow-ups or questions. Make sense? Ka pai? Great. Okay, so getting underway. First up, we have John Terrace. John, welcome. And representing the Christchurch Taita Visitors Centre Trust. Of course, John, as you would have just heard, we've received your submission and been able to read that, but any further points you'd like to make or anything you'd like to reinforce, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's very good of you to give us the time, and I won't take too much, I hope. Excuse me. I want to thank the Council for its help to date with our project. We have to be very grateful to the planning staff and also to the Mayor's office. You were generous enough to give us seeding funding a number of years ago, and that really started us off. You've given us help with fees. That too is gratefully received. Been a long process. We started out very over-ambitious. We got carried away with ourselves there. And then we've had property problems as well. And then there was COVID, and then there was the building industry constraints that hit people like us. This afternoon, we hope to reach agreement with our preferred builder. So that's something which is a major milestone as far as we're concerned. We've been limited, of course, as we all are, by the fact that money's tight. And we've had to considerably modify our original plans. So we've had to capitulate to the fact that times are hard, money's difficult to raise. The Council, as I said, and the Mayor have been very supportive. Our biggest donor is actually the Lotteries Commission. They've given us $100,000. The Council is our next biggest donor. We had a big hold-up when we made application to the Hutt City Council Heritage Incentive Fund because it was found that we didn't meet the criteria. And that was a major stumbling block because it took 6 months to sort out. Fortunately, we got it sorted out happily, but the reason that I'm here this morning is that if you were looking for a disincentive for a community-based heritage project, you would have to say that professional fees are a major weight on an organisation which is run entirely by volunteers. But the situation that we have is that there are certain obligations that we have to meet in highly specialised and very exacting areas like the drawing up of architects' plans, architectural draftsmen, in other words. They don't come cheap, and we have to pay for people like that. So our intention of being here this morning is just to make you aware of the fact that the Council's own Heritage Incentive Fund is a disincentive to projects like ours. Now, you may think, well, this is a silly little church in the back box of nowhere. Why should we worry? It's actually, in heritage terms, a major taonga. When I say that, what I mean is that it's not only the oldest church in the Wellington region, it's the oldest building still in use in the Wellington region. And that's because the first New Zealand company-sponsored settlers to come to New Zealand didn't settle in Auckland or Wellington or Christchurch. They settled in the Hutt Valley. They landed on Petone Beach in January 1840, and 12 years later, only 12 years later, those same settlers built this church, and it's still there. So it's a monument to settler persistence, but also to the tremendous relationship between tangata whenua and the new settlers. So if you're going to celebrate heritage anywhere, this is the project where you'd want to give some ear and some support. So we're not asking for money here today. What we're doing is we're asking you, would you please take another look at the Heritage Incentive Fund criteria, because they exclude us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate you taking the time. Is there any questions? Councillor Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, John, for your presentation and for the work of the Trust to restore that church. It is a real important taonga in our city. I was curious, you said your closing comment was that this fund excluded you, and I understand that you couldn't use it for the planning process, but have you been able to access that Heritage Incentive Fund for other parts of your project?
Well, the short answer is no. We have been able to prevail upon the management level decision-making body, which is responsible for distributing the Heritage Incentive Fund, even though our request doesn't fit within the criteria. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I guess my question is, I understand that the consenting part of your project doesn't fit in the criteria, but surely you have building costs and other costs that could have been met by the same fund?
Well, we're in the sort of stages of testing that, because we have applied again to the Heritage Incentive Fund for subsequent fees and expense, professional fees and expenses. And the stumbling block is still the criteria and the fact that they don't meet, that application doesn't meet those criteria. So we're just simply pointing that out to you. Not that it wasn't as a result of an exception to the criteria that presently apply, that we weren't able to, we were able to get access to some help, but it was a sort of exceptional circumstances situation.
Okay.
I haven't made that clear.
Yep. No, thank you. And we'll certainly get officials to comment on this further as well. Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. It isn't an aside. Later in this year, there's the Wellington Heritage Week. Will the church be open for viewing?
Yes, indeed. Yes, it's been open every year that that particular anniversary has come around. But the difficulty with hosting, Madam Deputy Mayor, is that there's nowhere to do it. The visitor centre is going to make it possible for, you know, small parties to actually have a guided tour, which we're not able to offer a facility for at the moment. And when I mean that, what I mean is that the visitor centre will actually have somebody on site on a regular basis.
Thank you very much, John. We will note down your comments and ask officials to respond as well around the criteria and the issues that you've raised.
Thank you so much for your hearing.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, next up we have Patrick McKibben from the Hutt Valley Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Patrick. So we'll just get the time back on the screen. Yep. Okay, well, we'll get underway, but we'll get that rolling. So Patrick, 5 minutes and over to you. Thank you so much for your very thorough submission as well.
Okay, kia ora. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I wanted to start with some general comments about the Hutt Valley business community and the business community here in Lower Hutt, and which there is a lot to love about the business community here in the Hutt Valley. Every day I am amazed by the businesses that operate here. I often get to go behind these very old doors and see these businesses that are innovating, creating, they're manufacturing, they're providing service to their customers and the community. And so there's a lot to love about the businesses here. I had the pleasure last night of attending the Mayor's Pacific business meeting, and it was a pleasure to see and hear from some of those Pacific businesses that operate in our community and are really doing their best to service their customers and the community every day. We have fantastic research and innovation businesses here in the Hutt Valley and a manufacturing community that delivers over $1 billion to our GDP every year. So there is a lot to love. We've also got investment coming into our community around the Riverlink project and the Tiara Tupua cycleway, and those will bring investment and jobs and opportunities for our business community, which is very valuable in the scheme of those businesses and the next number of years and the opportunities that they might have to participate in that. Our businesses employ thousands of people here in this community who are also ratepayers within residential ratepayers, either through directly through owning houses or directly through being a renter and paying their share of the rates through those rents via their landlords. But there is a big but in all of this for our business community. There have been and are expected to be considerable headwinds for the business community over the next number of years. Just some of the challenges that our businesses face are high inflation. Now, this is pushing up the cost of doing business, it's pushing up the cost of materials. Many of our businesses are operating internationally, and those prices are also going up. It's not only New Zealand that's facing those economic headwinds. Our businesses are facing significantly higher interest rates, higher costs to import and export, higher raw material costs. They faced minimum wage increases, which, don't get me wrong, they're a good thing, but they are an additional cost for our business community. And they're facing additional rents, and certainly they're facing staff expectations around pay and remuneration on a regular basis. In our recent business confidence survey, 80% of our businesses said they're expecting the costs of doing business to rise in the next 3 to 6 months. And of concern there, which is, there's a significant concern there, but of concern is that 6% more than said that in 3 months earlier. So there are more and more businesses facing this problem. 50% of businesses in the Hutt Valley community think that things will be much worse over the next 3 months. So things are not easy for our business community, and I'm sure we all want a successful business community and a thriving economy here in the Hutt Valley. So what is our kind of, request to the Hutt City Council? We ask you to very carefully consider the relationship between successful businesses and a successful Hutt Valley. Successful businesses create jobs, economic benefit, and contribution to the thriving Hutt Valley. There is a significant risk that businesses are faced with those additional costs, cannot offer the same employment opportunities and cannot offer the same number of jobs that we're expecting. In fact, the Reserve Bank is actively pushing and saying that they want more people to be unemployed, and I paraphrase that a little bit. we ask you to reconsider some of the increases that you're proposing around parking, around commercial water charges and consent fees. These will all have an impact on businesses and put businesses under more pressure. We ask that you consider the relationship between businesses and their share of the overall rates bill. As you push up the share of rates for businesses and push down the share for residential customers, that puts our business community under even more pressure. We do ask that you show and demonstrate value that businesses are getting for their rates. There is, I think, very little understanding about what businesses actually get for the rates contribution that they make. And we do ask finally that you think about incentives, not penalties. And I guess what I did include that in my submission. That's about asking you to consider how you reward businesses for doing things which you want them to do, such as take action in regards to climate change. Thank you very much for your time.
No, thank you, Patrick. Really appreciate that. Is there any questions, quick questions from members? Councillor Dyer, Councillor Edwards.
Thank you so much for your submission and your work, Patrick. One quick question, clarification from your submission. You talked about recycling. Were you suggesting that we should extend our curbside recycling to business users?
Yes, it's definitely one of the things that we think would be useful. Businesses are already doing a lot in that way, but could be incentivised to do more. I think that there's a good chance that you'll get a better outcome from businesses if that service is provided alongside residential customers.
Councillor Edwards.
Same question as Councillor Dyer. Are you aware of any local authorities, Patrick, that are helping out businesses in the recycling area?
No, I haven't done that research. Sorry, Simon.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, next up we have Gary Quirk, and this is a personal submission. Great to have you around the table, Gary. So you have 5 minutes, and
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Right. So I understand that everybody's got my revised proposal or submission, if you like. So I'll just probably try and process it a bit. So my name's Gary Quirk. I'm one of those unique breeds called a ratepayer. A ratepayer because, and also, by the way, have quite an extensive experience as a senior executive in a major international company. So I do feel I know what I'm talking about to a large extent. So first of all, I'd just like to congratulate the council for addressing some of the issues that have come up through what we've just heard from the previous speaker about inflation and difficulties in terms of providing resources to projects, etc. So I think you've addressed it reasonably well in terms of some of the cutbacks. And I think the pamphlet that you put out actually shows some of the good work that you've actually done. But there's a few gaps in it. It's not what's in it, it's what's left out of it is what I believe is a key issue. So I thought about it and thought, why am I making this presentation today? Well, I'm making it for a number of reasons. One is I've come to previous presentations and I've never heard anything about the ratepayer. I've heard a lot about projects which have all got their merit. I'm not arguing about anything about them, but there's nothing about who pays for it at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, it's the ratepayer. And I think that's the key issue to try and put up today is some of the thoughts about some of the issues that are facing the ratepayer in respect to the increases that they've not only have in the coming year, but also in previous years and in future years too, by the way. So I went through a lot of papers. There are a lot of papers and I feel very sorry for you guys for having to read so many papers from so many meetings, etc. I don't know how you keep up with it. But I highlighted a number of factors that I think are appearing because of what I would call a perfect storm coming up. You've got all these projects that you've started up, which have got their own merit, but collectively are going to see the council blow its budgets. When I look in terms of things like some of the ones that are planned and some of the ones that are unplanned, then they've all got areas that I would call potential significant increases. And there are factors out there which are showing that the government will not support you anymore because it's got its other priorities. It will support you in terms of the commitments made already, but in the future, I think that places like the East Coast and Auckland, etc., are going to have to be supported by the government. So we've heard the previous speaker talk about shortages in terms of supplies, shortages in terms of staff. All these sorts of factors are going to have it. The nine-eye pool. The nine-eye pool, from what I've read, is a lot of the contingency, which is $10 million, as I understood when it was first set up, has actually been committed, and we're halfway through it. So the potential there for increases is quite high. The Eastern Bay Shared Cycleway, I say no more about it in terms of, you know better than I do in terms of what. Eastern Hutt Road, which wasn't planned, but it was a consequence of a very wet winter. The south end is the one that's been affected. What happens if the north end is affected? Because the north end, to me, looks much steeper than the south end, and there's potential for another climate change issue coming out of it. You've got the renegotiation of the parks and reserves contracts coming up, and I've seen in some of the information the fact that you're going to potentially downgrade the services. Well, a ratepayer won't be very happy about paying more for less. That's all I would say. Riverlink may be a good project at the end of the day, but the fact that you're in with two other parties who've got bigger checkbooks than the Hutt City Council is a bit of a risk, in my view, in terms of the positions. So those, and then you've got your borrowing levels to meet it all. So those to me are the concerns that I have as a ratepayer. So I tried to be positive and think about, well, how can I help you today in terms of some of the considerations that you need to take into account? I'm not that believing that you're going to make too many changes to the current annual plan. I think it's too far advanced, in my view, with the 30th of June being the deadline, that you'll make too many changes. But there are some you need to consider. This area of reserves, you need to build up reserves or release them for unexpected, like like the Eastern Hutt Road. So in the moment, as I understand, in the budget, in the balance sheet, they've got some what's called discretionary reserves of something like 37 million, which over a period of time are going to build up to 50 million. Looks good on the balance sheet, might help the borrowings levels, but why can't you release them for some of these unexpected climate change issues? Deferral of the cycling program. At the moment, is in the current plan, I think there's $13 million. Subsequent years, it goes down to $3 million, etc. A review of the impact of COVID. The consequences of COVID are such, in my view, that we're not going to return back to pre-COVID positions. People working from home. I mean, it took me 15 minutes to find a car park to get here today because every car park seems to be full. The question of Seaview Marina. Why is the Hutt City Council involved in the Seaview Marina? I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you sell off the land, but consider the business. The business is not something the council should be involved in. Leave it to people who can deal with it, because at the moment, the returns are very poor, and also it's tying up funds through borrowing. So you can operate it in a different model entirely by retaining the land. So in my view, the council needs to look in terms of, does it need to be involved in the business of the Seaview Marina, not the land and the things like that. So those are the key things that I've sort of tried to look at in terms of where things that can be reviewed, I suppose, in terms of the position overall. But fundamentally, I believe that we have to look at the bigger picture. Each individual project you look at has got its merits. But can, at the end of the day, the council continue to have increases of double digits just about in ratepayers? I don't think so. Thank you for the opportunity. Speaking today, good luck in terms of your reviews and your hearings today. I'll leave it to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Gary. We'll do some quick questions. I really appreciate you taking the time to send this through, and also I know on other occasions you've sent through thoughts which are always really helpful. I just wanted to touch on one question, which is around water infrastructure. So probably around 50% of our rates increase is water infrastructure. And I note that that's not here in your submission. Do you have any views on that? Because that is probably the number one thing which is driving some of our rates increases and costs, aside from, and you know, fairly note a number of other things as well. Yeah.
I do have some views on it. I mean, we get into the issue of three waters, but I won't get into that, because if you took that out, my question would be, what's left over for the council? Because I do have a view on the fact that our transport planning is limited because of the fact we are half of the vehicles that come into the Hutt Valley every day come from out of town, and yet they don't pay for anything in terms of the position overall, except through indirect subsidies through the government in terms of the position overall. So yes, I do believe that the council needs to invest in water. I don't have an issue with that in terms of the position. The means by which it does that in the future is the area that I do have a few views on. But yes, I mean, you have to take the view. But when I looked into the brochure here, which talked about 50% of it going towards the water, it wasn't that I was looking at. I thought that's not an issue. My point is, what's the other 50% going into?
Thank you. Any other quick questions? Councillor Edwards?
Thanks, Gary, giving us lots of thought to think about. I'm just trying to square your recognition in the submission of the climate change emergency and your call for deferral of cycleways, particularly when cycleways are something that the government is significantly co-investing with us in, and also your comment that you couldn't find a park around here. How do you square those things?
Well, I think you've got a political decision to make in terms of cycleways, because that's what the government wants to promote at the end of the day. But to me, the cycleway issue is one of changing people's thinking. It's not about building more and people will come. You've got to actually change people's thinking about using cycleways. And at the moment, for example, a lot of the cycleways are used for recreational purposes, not for business purposes. So I go to Avalon Park, and every Tuesday and Thursday morning I see all these older people my age. I don't want to put myself into older. I see them getting electric bikes and riding on the cycleways. So there is a selling process, if you like, to convince people to get out of their cars, because of the issue there. And the other factor I think that comes into play is that public transport is very good, but it's going the wrong direction. It should be going east-west to cater for that side of things rather than all north-south. It doesn't cater for east-west.
Thank you so much, Gary. We will need to move through just with our other submitters who are arriving, but thank you again. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, we'll move through, but before I do that, I was remiss in missing conflict of interest declarations before. So noting, of course, there are quite a few submissions, so you can, if something comes up where you go, oh, hold on a second, we can raise it through the day. But is there any conflicts of interest that members would like to declare at the moment? No? Okay, please feel free at any stage to raise your hand. Okay, so next we have Casey Diver. Welcome, Casey, and you're speaking on behalf of the Stokes Valley Football Club.
It's a bit different. It's a new table, isn't it? I haven't been here since the elections. So you've got the submission on behalf of Stokes Valley Football Club, so I'm not going to read it verbatim. I'm just going to highlight the key points. I would like to just point out and offer my thanks on behalf of the club to Councillor Shaw, Mexted and Hutt City Council for their ongoing support of the club over the last 12 months. We've had a significant uptick in support from those entities and from Councillor Shaw. That's definitely changed the dynamics in the club in terms of thinking more positively and more in the long term rather than just in the short term needs. And that's a part of, makes up the bulk of the submission, is this looks at the long term needs. So look, the first point that we're asking for is one of infrastructure. I'd say infrastructure. We would like to enter into discussions with Hutt City Council to obtain a lease to Holborn Park so that we can put a prospectus together to fund the building of an artificial turf, not by council funds, by our own. The key of that is that we operate on Delaney Park, and since 1967, Delaney Park has had 3 pitches for football. And when our club was founded in 1967, we had 4 teams. So fast track nearly 60 plus years now, we have about 32 teams and 3 pitches. We have grown beyond our means, unfortunately, with the assets that we have. So we would like to start thinking long-term about building new infrastructure that is more long-term and long-lasting. Now, if any of you have gone up to Holborn Park in Stokes Valley, you would see that it is a bog. It is unusable, and it has been closed since the beginning of the football season. We have not touched it. We have not trained on it because it's been deemed by Mexted to be unsuitable for training. We would like to build something better on it, and in the last 12 months, we've been working with local businesses, both in the Hutt and outside the Hutt, to raise sponsorship and funds for our own club. We've been very successful in that front. And so we've come together and made the decision that, hey, why don't we think bigger in the long term? But in order to do that, the one thing we would require is a confirmation from Hutt City Council that if we were to put a prospectus to the council to build such an infrastructure, that we would be able to lease the land from council as it is council's land. That is the primary purpose of me being here today, is for that, just to start sounding out the potential opportunity to build a resilient infrastructure that is co-owned, in the sense that it is not on council to pay for in entirety. It's up to the individual organisation to raise the funds themselves through a variety of third-party means and work in conjunction with council to build a long-lasting infrastructure that can be used not just for the football club, but for the other sport codes that operate in the Hutt Valley. A couple of our other points are installation of new floodlights on Delaney Park. We have been encountering issues with games and matches, and especially our junior training. It gets a lot darker after 5 o'clock, and we don't have adequate lighting for the entire park. Recently, Stokes Valley Rugby Club was able to get new floodlights purchased, but they were installed on existing poles. What we would like is permission to build 2 new poles at the far end of our pitches so that we can actually light up the entire park rather than just half of the football pitches. That's, again, another project that we would co-fund with a variety of third-party stakeholders. A couple of the other points are the Hutt City, the changing rooms that are owned by Hutt City Council. In previous years, we have come regarding this that they need to be upgraded because they haven't been touched in about 20 years. The only addition they've had in the last 10 years is the introduction of new water cylinders, but they're no longer fit for purpose in the sense that they are toilets and changing rooms, and the toilets sometimes don't work. As they are council assets, we would like to work with council in order to get them upgraded within the next 12 to 18 months through a simple transaction of we supply the men, council supplies the material costs. We have plumbers, electricians, builders. We've got dozens of volunteers eager and happy to waive their labour costs in exchange to make sure that the material costs are met. And because it's a council asset, we cannot physically alter it ourselves. Security cameras, this is something we've brought in previous years. Sorry, I'll be as quick as I can. This is something we've brought in previous years. Lately, we've been having a significant uptick in antisocial behaviour, dirt biking and tagging. So this is becoming a higher priority for us. We've also had calls from the Lower Hutt Police asking for security camera footage of recent, so we say, gang-related activity on Delaney Park. And unfortunately, I have to turn around and say to them, I have nothing to give you because we have no cameras. The continuation of Delaney Park's number 2 and number 3 football pitch being drained and upgraded, that has been on our list for a number of years, and that's just has to be put into the budget within the next 10 years. And really the rest is just sort of window dressing, so the removal of the rest of the rubbish bins on the Stokes Valley Creek side to stop local people dumping their household rubbish on the pitch, which they are still continuing to do. And then upgrading also the bench seating on the creek side of the playing fields. And as a final note, just increased signage around Delaney, increased council signage regarding the existing bylaws and rules for users. We feel that there is a lack of signage on Delaney Park regarding bylaws and regarding the existing rules and uses of the park, and we would like to see a little bit of update there in terms of just, council presence. Cool, done.
Thanks, Casey. We have gone over time, but I can see Councillor Shaw's hand popping up. So, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Casey, and congratulations to you and your committee for the significant growth that you've experienced over the past couple of years. Well done on that. And I see the Prime Minister popped into your ground last week just to check in and watch a bit of football as well.
It was very funny. We found it very funny that his, shall we say, security force didn't have the appropriate footwear. It was, let's just say, with 200 kids after a significant downpour, it was a bit muddy.
I'm interested in your desire to have an artificial turf up at Holborn Park, and appreciate the fact that you guys are putting your hands up, not your hands out. We're really keen on multi-use type facilities. Is this sort of the thing that you would engage other groups with, and how would you involve them in that process?
Well, at the moment, it's sort of in that exploratory stage where we want to see if it's even possible. So if we put the prospectus together, and by that I mean where the funds are coming from, the businesses that want to be involved, the other sport codes that want to be involved, that'll put some money in, that'll want to use it, all that. If we prepare all that material only to be turned away and said, well, we're not going to lease the land to you, you're not going to build on it, we're not going to have anything to do with it, then it's a colossal waste of time. From a volunteer perspective, none of us paid. Our goal is that if we can get over this first step in writing, that we would start going out to the other sport codes in the Upper Valley, to start building that interest. And from that interest, we would be able to work with local businesses to start building, what it actually looks like. And once we have those two relationships going and committed, then we'd be able to present the prospectus to council of saying, these are the people that want to be involved, this is what they're prepared to do, this is how we're prepared to do it, this is what we need. So it would be in no means a...
Yeah, we're going to have to move forward just because we're starting to back up with speakers who are waiting. So thank you very much, Casey. What we'll do is obviously raise these matters with our officials as well. And I think a number of them can probably be taken offline as well, some of the smaller ones. Yep. Thanks so much, Casey. Appreciate it. Okay, next we have Michael Ellis. Welcome, Michael, on Zoom. The floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
All right, thank you. Ko Michael Ellis, toko inoa, ko waiwhetu, toko awa. I'm Michael Ellis. I'm chair of the Friends of Waiwhetu Stream. Our work along Waiwhetu Stream, I think, is well known to the councillors, but essentially it's planting cleanups and advocacy work. And we rely on the Hutt City Council to do a lot of our logistics work for our practical activities. And I want to say just at the outset, the council does a really good job with us, and we really appreciate the support we get from the council. Just in the last year, however, the ranger role within Parks and Gardens has been replaced with an ecologist role. So that role is now working more on strategic plans for the city, including the urban forest strategy. And as part of their duties, though, they are still expected to support community groups. Just do not think that's the best use of their time and expertise. So what the Friends of Waiwhetu Stream are requesting is that a ranger role be re-established to support our group and other community groups with their work on council reserves.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate that, and clear and concise as well. So I think then a lot of time for questions, which is great. So Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, Michael. Thank you for zooming in and sharing your submission. What has practically changed in those roles? What's practically changed for you as Friends of Waiwhetu Stream in the last 12 months with support from council?
In terms of support, it's essentially finding the time with the particular officer working on the urban forest strategy and other more strategic work on behalf of council. and expecting them to do the community support role within the that used to be completed by a full-time ranger. It's just, I think, too much work for them to be able to do. So it just means that the support is not at the same level as what we had before, and it's becoming more difficult for us to plan our events reliably.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell and then Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you, Michael. Just a point of clarification, and I will seek clarification from our officers on this, but I think you said that your understanding is that the community ranger was replaced by a biodiversity officer. Is that your understanding, that there wasn't previously a biodiversity officer, or have roles been combined?
Well, just from our point of view, the work that we were previously doing with the ranger, when she left the council, it was replaced. The person we're now working with is an ecologist who is working on the urban forest strategy. And that's quite a big job in itself, and expecting them to do the ranger role as well, working with community groups, I think is asking too much of them.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. I'm going to go back in time and just ask you to, can you recall council working with Ministry of the Environment when we used to have an officer that was funded by them? Do you recall that?
I'm afraid I do not recall how the funding arrangements were done. Just that, since the group was established 10 years ago, we've always had excellent support from the council. I'm loath to criticise any particular person here. I completely support what the council is doing with the urban forest strategy. I just think that the workload for that person is too great, and if the council was to fund a ranger role or to find funding from some other organisation for that ranger role to support community groups, the council would get the benefit of that in terms of the work that those community groups do.
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree.
Councillor Briggs.
Thank you, Michael. Have you or any of your members from Friends of Waifetu engaged with any other restoration groups or nature-based charities in the Hutt Valley and had similar feedback from them as well, or is it mainly just your own experience as your organisation?
Yeah, it's our experience as an organisation. Yeah, I can only provide some other anecdotal comments I've heard. I really wouldn't want to speak on behalf of other groups though.
Ka pai. Thank you.
Final question, Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for you, Michael, is have you had any interaction with Greater Wellington Regional Council? I know that, so Deputy Mayor Tui Lewis and myself were part of the Whaitua committee process. One of the recommendations that came out of that was support for community coordinators within the catchments. And I see that as another pathway that should have been implemented by 2025. So, but I don't know where that's gotten or whether you guys have had any interactions there.
Yeah, so we also work well with Greater Wellington. Obviously their focus is more on the stream bed rather than the banks where the council reserve is, and the floodplain management. So our work with them tends to focus on those areas rather than our planting work and cleanup work.
Thank you very much, Michael. So we will raise this issue and certainly come back to your submission as well. Really appreciate you taking the time to zoom in.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, councillors.
Thanks. Okay, next we have the Wainuiomata Community Board. So we've got Te Awa Leah as well. Welcome, great to have you. And for our community boards, we have 10 minutes. So please feel free to use that time. Anything you'd like to touch on further in your submission, and then we can open it up for questions.
Okay, cool, thank you. I don't think we'll use the whole 10 minutes, but thank you for that. Firstly, tēnā tātou katoa kua hui hui. Mai nei I tēnei rangi. Before I present our oral submission, I just want to acknowledge the whānau in Wellington right now in Newtown who are going through some tragedies, particularly with some people who are still unaccounted for. So my heart's with them and also with the Wellington City Council out there who are having to respond to that incident as well. Also want to acknowledge everyone who's spoken before us and will be speaking after us. John Terrace has left, but I wanted to pay particular acknowledgement to him as he was the mayor at the time that I applied for a scholarship to, well, not a scholarship, but a sister city exchange to Arizona Tempe, and that was an experience that changed my life. So with him gone, but I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. And also to everybody at this table, the councillors, community board members of Eastbourne and Petone as well, who do amazing work for the communities and are here, you know, to advocate and to ensure that all those communities are being advocated for and well taken care of. I just introduced myself. It's Te Awa Puketapu, who's the chair of Wainemata Community Board, and alongside myself is Leah Clark, who is a community board member. And also with us, who's come along from Wainemata High School, is Keelan Renata, who is a student rep at the Wainemata High School, and he's here shadowing today. There's an opportunity to see what happens in these processes. So thank you for the opportunity to provide this submission today. And we note that in the draft annual plan, there's multiple projects that the council is having to rebalance, to reprioritise, and we've provided some written feedback to that. And particularly we're noting the Petone Wharf as being one of those major projects that needs to be considered, and it's important for us to note that we support the Petone Community Board in that because they are much closer to that piece of work and that project. And yeah, we would just like to put that support there as well to them. We also note that there's some big projects that are occurring within the bigger, wider Hutt Valley area, particularly the development with the Nānau Pool, the Riverlink and Te Aratupua, which have been raised this morning already. But those are some projects that we've seen have been undertaken and we've observed those as well. I'd like to bring your attention closer to Wainemata, which this oral submission will mainly focus on. We do note that the recent dog park, well, it's not so much recent, but the dog park installation is there for the Wainemata, and we see a lot of people utilising that, both the fur babies and the humans. And we know that that project is still yet to be completed, so we support that project continues to be completed so that that can get its full use and full potential. Our community board, when we first opened or established at the end of last year, but also the beginning of this year, we met and we decided that we wanted 4 principles to adopt as our guiding principles for how we undertake our roles. And those principles were mātauranga, kaitiakitanga, maramatanga and whanaungatanga. And we believe that the following 2 projects that I want to talk about will strongly enable those principles that we've set as a board to occur within Wainemata. The first project that we want to talk about is the Wainemata Coast Road. The current draft annual plan identifies that the work required there is to install a retaining wall because of the river shifting closer to the road. And we think that's a priority work and would like to get that underway as soon as possible, particularly for the risk of the properties down there as well. one of the things we'd like to put to council today is the consideration of that road for the long-term plan, particularly around safety moving forward, and whether or not the continuous installation of retaining walls is going to do justice to that road in the future, knowing the impacts of climate change. We're already seeing the river shifting. So we'd like to put to the council the opportunity for that area to be considered a priority area within Wainuiomata in the next discussions for the long-term plan. We've also heard from our community the desire for the council to consider green spaces, play spaces in Wainuiomata that are quality, that are educational, that are culturally appropriate, tells the history of Wainuiomata, that are accessible and ties into their surrounding environments. Spaces that allow families to come together with facilities such as restrooms, bathrooms, barbecue areas, and spaces that offers activities for the families to be able to live together, to play together, to be together, and to stay within Wainuiomata. We know that a lot of the families leave Wainui to go and utilise facilities such as Avalon Park, such as Silverstream, Newtown, I've heard from the residents, and I've just seen in Kapiti, the playground up there, which is, I think has been nominated #1 playground in New Zealand now, which I'd love for this council to have in Wainui. But we'd like to keep those families in Wainui so that they're able to access that without having to leave their places. And we believe that project supports the priority that the council has around housing intensification, so to allow whānau to stay within Wainuiomata. We also note that a lot of the playgrounds within Wainui are of poor condition. They are not accessible. They do not provide sensory type options for children, for young people, for families. And they don't, and as I've said, they don't necessarily encourage our families to stay in Wainuiomata. So that's really what we're here for, is to, yes, you've read our written submission on the draft annual plan, but actually to place in front of the council as a new board these priorities that we'd like you to consider moving forward for Wainuiomata. So once again, I acknowledge everyone here and all the work that everyone is doing. And before I close off, I just want to see if Leah wanted to add anything.
No, actually, it's all been said clearly, and just relating to the Coast Road River and that is that, you know, once a river, always a river. And so, like, you know, we've seen that throughout the country and with this climate change, so we really need to consider that a serious option to look at. And our playgrounds, I mean, our children tell it as it is. It's steel. There's no sun safety barriers like trees and things like that. So, I mean, they'll tell you what it is, what it's all about and what they would like. So if you ever consider planning playgrounds, talk to the children.
Cool, thank you for your time. And we're happy to take questions.
Thanks so much, Tiawa. Thank you, Leah. Any questions? I'll kick off just in regards to the playground. So one challenge we have right across the city, of course, is the amount of playgrounds we have, the upkeep, the cost of that. So do you have a suggestion or a way forward for us in Wainuiomata if there was a consolidation or a focus on one playground and to upgrade that, or are you talking about smaller upgrades at those sort of neighbourhood playgrounds across the suburb?
Good question. I think what we have been hearing from the community is the need for a single location playground, a good playground which would require investment, that allows all the families to come together. We would be really keen to do some more work with the community on that, to understand that more in relation to the other playgrounds around Wainuiomata, because we also understand that if we have a playground, a big playground, it's not always easy for someone who lives down sort of end of Coast Road, for example. I'm just picking a place or to get to. So yeah, that would be really keen if the council is interested in doing this, to do some more work on that and to understand that more.
Councillor Brown.
Kia ora te awa and Leah, thank you very much for your fulsome submission. In relation to the playground, have the Wainuiomata High School really led the way in telling the narrative around streets, and that fed into our change of a policy. Across the country, there's a movement now that is telling the narrative in playgrounds, ara takaro, and using the tools and items that are already in Wainuiomata to tell the story within the playground. So that could be something that the high school and schools might be interested in. And it'd also be good to know the numbers for accessibility in Wainuiomata. We know anecdotally that it's quite high, but what those numbers are, because there is very few for, but have you heard of the ara takaro?
I've heard very little about it, and it is something that I'm really keen to understand. And I mean, this was a priority that we as a board identified at the beginning of the year. We heard it as at our first engagement at Wainuiomata, I nearly said Waifatu, sorry, Wainuiomata Marae at the end of last year. Yeah, so it's right now, the purpose for today is to highlight to the council and to say if we are really keen to explore exactly what you're talking about. And sometimes it's not all about the bells and the whistles as well. Like I'm a teacher by trade, and one of the things that I used to always observe with children was you give them a playground, and the thing they always end up at was playing in the box that you left on the ground for them. So it's about working with young people, like you say, the high school and families, to understand the what. So yeah, that's a bit of a tangent, but yeah, really interested to be really creative about what this looks like and hold on to its purpose and good quality at the same time. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We will need to move through, but thank you for the really great submission, and I know that we'll be taking those points on and talking further. And good to see you, Keelan, as well. Welcome to the council chamber. So great to have you along. Awesome. Okay, now our next submitter was unable to join us. They were going to join virtually. So that was Cleve Cameron. He did send an email through which he wanted me to read. So it's quite brief, so I'll do it for him. He just wanted me to share. So Cleve Cameron is on behalf of Big Street Bikers. He said, congratulations on your ongoing work to enable more biking in the city, and especially the new work with the Streets for People and transport choices for the Magic Triangle. Big Street Bikers are thrilled to be working with the transport team to be rolling out a Locky Dock network, it puts in brackets, at no cost to ratepayers, to complement this new cycleway infrastructure. So we'll just note that down. Okay, now moving through to Belinda Moss on behalf of the Eastbourne Community Board. Welcome, Belinda. As with the Wainuiomata Community Board, you do have up to 10 minutes. Of course, you don't need to use all of that, and we can use some of the questions as well.
Thank you, Tēnā koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Eastbourne Community Board submission on the draft annual plan. We found it to be a sensible, pragmatic plan. Congratulations. We'd like to talk about, I'm going to talk about two topics in relation to the plan. One is the Te Pū Horonuku Eastern Bay's shared path. We're concerned that of all the proposals in the draft annual plan, this received the most negative feedback from residents, with 35% supporting the budget increase and 44% against it. This is because the project is often referred to as a cycle path or a shared path. It's misunderstood by many as a frivolous project for people who ride bikes. In reality, this project is about widening a road no longer fit for purpose. It's too narrow for the size of modern cars and the volume of traffic to exist with walkers and cyclists. It's a shared road project. Equally important, it's a resilience project. Seeing the communications team refer to this aspect more is pleasing, but we suggest changing the project name to reflect this more strongly. As we've said in our submission, the project will connect communities in the East Harbour. It'll connect Eastbourne to the Great Harbour Way for residents and visitors. It'll encourage active mode transport shift, which will reduce carbon emissions and help protect our environment. It'll provide resilience to the eastern bays as sea levels rise and weather patterns change. It'll provide recreation and economic benefits, and it'll help protect critical infrastructure. Lastly, Eastbourne residents are asking why Lowry Bay, or even just Northern Lowry Bay, isn't constructed earlier in the project plan rather than last. This area will have the most impact on the most people, especially drivers. Managing the southerly sea surge will reinforce the importance of the resilience aspect and save residents from several more years of regular saltwater washes. I'd also like to talk about bus service. The Community Board submitted on the proposed changes to the Cross Valley connection and the proposed increase in parking fees. Both these proposals would be mitigated by better public transport. Greater Wellington and Metlink have seriously let Eastbourne residents down. We all understand the issue of driver shortages and that Eastbourne is certainly not alone in this. However, Metlink continues to use inappropriate vehicles on the Eastbourne and Petone run, resulting in dangerous overcrowding on buses travelling at up to 90 kilometres an hour on the motorway. An improved bus and ferry service would reduce the volume of traffic on the Petone foreshore if this project is deferred. An improved bus service would make it easier for residents to use public transport to get to Lower Hutt rather than use their cars, and therefore not have to pay increased parking fees. We'd appreciate support from Council to address the public transport issues for Eastbourne residents. Thank you, that's all.
Thanks so much, Belinda. Councillor Briggs.
Thanks, Belinda. It's you and the board for the submission. Did you do a submission also to Greater Wellington Regional Council or engage them in their annual plan process, particularly around public transport?
We are engaging with Greater Wellington, thank you.
Great. I think if any of that communication could be shared with us, obviously we're constantly trying to get our regional colleagues to be taking public transport in our city more seriously and implementing positive change. I think if a joint approach on that would be beneficial as well for the whole city.
Agree.
Councillor Brown, then Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thanks for your submission, Belinda. Just building on when you submit to Greater Regional Council, it would be good to be in the loop, but it would also be good to connect with the Wainuiomata Community Board because we share the same challenges. Yeah, I won't say if not more, but just different challenges. But it might be worth working together for the submission to the Regional Council.
That's a good idea, and Petone as well because we share the same bus run.
Yeah, in Petone.
Thank you. Thanks, Belinda. Great submission, and you've covered really great points. On transport, I know you've done a lot of research on who uses the buses. What do you recall the numbers who have stopped using the buses from Eastbourne?
Oh, no, I don't. I'm sorry. But anecdotally, quite a few. Well, to be fair, we're starting to see a bit more reliability on the buses, but it's the current issue is the wrong vehicles being put on the runs. I'm submitting to Greater Wellington in a few weeks on the this after school run that comes back from Wellington. It has up to 20 children standing on the bus, and at that time of day the motorway is quite empty, so it's literally going 90 kilometres an hour with possibly inexperienced drivers.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, well, that takes us to lunchtime. Now, before we go for lunch, I will just check and go around the room if there's any particular points that members would like officers to follow up on. I've got a few here, but I'm happy to go around the table first. Okay, so we'll go from left to right. Okay, so Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Thank you. Yeah, I would like to know some information on what if MFE does to provide any more support for in that environmental space for officer support.
It's in relation to Michael Ellis's submission. Yep, Waifatu Stream. Councillor Briggs.
Similar, just around the capacity challenges that Michael and what Friends of Waifatu have raised, just around the understanding of the role change in our own capacity as well.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. Just a couple of things that John Terrace brought up. Is there anything we can do to help with professional fees with areas run by volunteers, and to request that we take a look at the Heritage Fund criteria? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dutt?
Yeah, the Chamber of Commerce's suggestion about expanding our recycling to businesses. And I think you've already mentioned that Casey raised some really good points, but I think a lot of those could be taken offline and worked through with officers.
I think on that would certainly be one for the LTP, but we could get some initial comments on that as well. Yep, Councillor Parkin.
Kia ora. Regarding John Terrace, if we can't change the criteria for that fund, can we look at waiving the fees from our end for the project? And also regarding the Waifatu stream, would it be more appropriate to have them engaging with the community engagement team rather than through the biodiversity side of things? Would there be more capacity within that environment?
Yeah. So similar question as earlier, but also looking wider around a possible solution. Yep, great. Councillor Stallinger.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Quirk made a comment about reserves and releasing reserves. I don't really understand that myself even, so just a comment from the officers on that would be helpful. And also the timing of the Te Horenuku project in relation to Lowry Bay. I don't have that in my mind, but just an update as to the urgency of that and when that fits in the timetable, and perhaps addressing the comments of the officers about that being the most important bit in the ECB's view.
Councillor Tupou.
Thank you, Mayor. Just an additional point, Michael Ellis, raised by colleagues, is the if officers can check the progress that Greater Wellington has made in regards to the Whaitua recommendations that were made for supporting community groups within the catchment.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, just a comment here on Gary Quirk's presentation. I didn't quite understand the discretionary reserves of 30 million, so we'd like a little bit more information on that. Also, just like to forward to the long-term plan is the discussion on the Holborn Park artificial turf. And also, I wasn't quite sure about the Heritage Incentive Fund too as well, so I'd like some more information on that, see how we can make that happen for that volunteer group. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mitchell.
Most of what I noted down has already been covered to some extent. Just in terms of the Heritage Incentive Fund, I was actually looking at our website and couldn't see why their project wasn't eligible. So as well as looking at the criteria themselves, looking at the comms around that and making sure they're accurate. And just again on the Friends of Waifatu Stream submission, if we could have a bit of clarification about what happened with those roles and the disestablishment, by the sound of things, of the community ranger role. I'm not sure that that was reported through to us when that happened, and I guess a comment on whether it would be possible to reinstate that role. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
As noted by others, the capacity, and if there was a role change in the support to, which resulted in less support to Friends of Waifatu, submission to Greater Regional Council, looking at how we could coordinate that and support the community boards, and we also be a part of it, particularly with the two community boards, Wainuiomata and Council, and how we can put together our strongest submission for that, and exploring the playground that is a learning playground, accessible playground, and tells the history of Wainuiomata as a concept.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
None that haven't already been mentioned, Mr Mayor, but I will say I've got a lot of time for community groups like Stoke Sally Football that come along offering to do a whole lot of work themselves and just looking for a little bit of help from council, and particularly interested in their idea with the changing rooms where they seem to only be seeking materials from us and they're going to do all the labour. Seems like a pretty good deal to me.
Yep, no, I certainly think that's one we could get the Parks team to work on, because there's quite a bit in that submission, and to come back to us. That might be a little bit later. Great. I think that's excellent. That's everyone has covered my list. The only other one I would mention is the incentives, not penalties part from the Chamber of Commerce submission. Just any further comment also on recycling's in there, but also those other items that they raise. And yeah, I think that pretty much covers it. I would say just also with Gary's submission, I wasn't quite sure in regards to the mention of the contingency with no pool, so I just would like some comment on that, and any other comment from that submission as well, which would be helpful for us. Great. Okay, so we can break for lunch, and we will be back at 12:40, and yeah, thank you very much.
The guy at the front is the one that's been there longest.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. We'll get back underway. Now, I'm just checking. So Lindsay Ferguson is not here yet. So if Lindsay arrives, we'll just reorder things. But we've got Alan Brown from the Rotary Club of Hutt City. Feel free, as many of you, if you'd like to come forward, if you guys are ready to go. Oh, separate? Yeah, no problem. Oh, Lindsay Ferguson? Oh, sorry. Yes, yep, yeah, absolutely. So, sorry, I thought, yes. No, that's fine. So representing Heart of the Hutt, thank you. So you do have a total of 5 minutes, including for questions, and we'll pass it over to you.
Actually, Charles Sands can't be here today, so he'd asked me to come along, make the presentation. Some councillors would know Charles and Jenny Sands. For the purposes of those that don't, Charles was a partner in a very successful London architecture practice for several decades. And him and Jenny, who was a Hutt person born and raised here, conducted a campaign back in 2013-14 when the then council unlawfully proposed to demolish the administration block in the horticultural hall. So it's in the context of Charles's ongoing interest in this general area, and particularly the Ridderford Gardens, that he's drafted this submission. He's basically saying that when he and Jenny read the council's intention to demolish the Tutakiwi Orchid House, the Gibbs-Watson Conservatory and the aviary in Ridderford Gardens, they found themselves in despair once again at the ongoing decline in the gardens, which were once the pride of the Hutt. They have accordingly put on their thinking caps to investigate whether there might not be a better way. Given the debt legacy inherited from a previous council, they were conscious of the council's need to identify all possible savings in the face of current heavy financial demands, and have approached this matter with those demands in mind. On a more positive note, they felt that the new civic development has created some notable benefits, particularly by enhancing the garden space at the rear of the administration building. This has given much greater emphasis to the focal point of the gardens, which is currently occupied by the aviary, a somewhat tired and dated concept and structure. This does not offer modern standards for the display and well-being of birds. However, its removal from this important location should not just leave an empty space, but could provide an appropriate site for a sculpture to celebrate the gardens. The central walkway has been extended from the library frontage along the Opahu stream and now forms an excellent route through the gardens from the library to the rear of the car park next to the events centre. Unfortunately, it runs out of steam at this point and splits into 3 separate pathways. The first of these leads to the Gibbs-Watson Conservatory building. This charming building is in need of some TLC,
but is well worthy of preservation and should be preserved to await better times with an alternative use. The second pathway leads to the Tutu Kiwi Orchid House, which is a landmark building and serves to define the corner of the Civic Square. It should also be retained and a new use identified. The third pathway along the side of the car park is situated where the main garden walkway should continue up to the Civic Square. If this were improved, it would complete the main pedestrian route through the whole of the gardens, taking together, linking together all the buildings in the civic complex. A proper entry point on the square could be provided linked to Tutu Kiwi House by tree planting, which would properly define this side of the square. A long-term project might be to extend the exotic arboretum next to the conservatory into this area to give the gardens a major presence on the square. One of these trees, or the planting of one of these trees, could precede the others. And the first tree could be planted in 2024 to celebrate the centenary of Redford Gardens and mark the beginning of the return of their status as the centrepiece of New Zealand's first garden city. So to quickly summarise, we are proposing 1, the demolition of the aviary and its replacement by a sculpture honouring the gardens and those who have enjoyed them. 2, retention of the Gibbs-Watson Conservatory for it to be repurposed. 3, retention of the Tutu Kiwi Orchid House for it also to be repurposed. In our opinion, these suggestions should not cost very much and could provide some positive progress in what is a difficult financial time for council. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay, and thank you to Charles,
Yes.
of course, for preparing that. So is there any quick questions from members? No? Okay, thank you
All
very
good.
much. Really appreciate it. Okay, Alan Brown? Yes. Hey, well, welcome. Yeah, great.
Thank you very much. We have a presentation. I'm accompanied by Galen Hughes, the president of Hutt City Rotary, and I'm a past president and prepared this on her behalf.
And Alan, Galen, just before you start as well, I did want to just invite Jared just to make a couple of comments, particularly around the process of engagement prior, because I think you've raised a very fair point there. And I just wanted to pass it over to them, I think, just to help also with the presentation and moving forward. That's okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is just in relation to, obviously you noted in the submission that there hasn't been good consultation with the club. Just on behalf of officers, I'd like to apologise for that not happening and acknowledge that it hasn't been a particularly courteous approach. So certainly after this meeting, we would like to, through the Parks and Reserves team, have a more thorough conversation around the proposal.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Pass it over to you. Yeah.
Thank you. So the Redford Gardens has been an important part of the Hutt way back since 1923. That photo there was taken in 29, showing what was there then. It was, in fact, the original garden city in New Zealand. It went through major developments in the 1950s with all those modernist buildings being built, and that theme has been continued on in the modern developments. Sorry about that. It's only my wife.
Can't say only. We
No
might
doubt
have
wishing
to
me luck.
adjourn this meeting, actually.
But in the 70s, some new things happened, and the Gibbs-Watson Conservatory for ferns was produced, and that was quite a magnificent building proposed at that time. And it really was a crystal palace, and that approach was enhanced as Rotary got involved later on and produced the Tutu Kiwi Orchid House, which happened in 1978. So it was built by Rotary and gifted to the city at that time, It was built to house a renowned collection of orchids, including the Tutakiwi, which is that New Zealand orchid down there. A lot of businesses made contributions to make this happen, in particular Angus Construction and Pools Engineering, who actually built this building as well. And we used it extensively during the Shapeshifter exhibition, and so it's really an important part of our involvement with the development of the city, and so we think we have a stake in its future. We've been really thrilled to see the other work that's been going on in the council area, in the Ridderford Gardens, and some beautiful pieces of work there, and we really like that. Unfortunately, that didn't happen to these two buildings, which are now, while structurally sound, are in poor condition, and it's not surprising, therefore, that council have considered what you might do with them and have proposed that they be demolished to reduce costs. Now, we actually have an alternative proposal, and so we recognise that it's the original purposes of these two buildings is no longer really that important or apparent, but a new use could be sought. And so we're saying these buildings should be repurposed rather than demolished. They're in parts of the park where greater activation would be beneficial, and so this could bring back public life into this part of the park, and we think that's important. And this could move what is currently considered by you lovely people as a cost. It could actually be an income stream, and so there's a real opportunity here that we're presenting to you today. Here's some examples of things that are in other parks around the place: cafes, wedding venues, bike hire bases, display centres, art galleries, and so on, are all possible. They exist in other parks, and there's no reason why they couldn't exist in this park and be a great enhancement to the city. So our recommendation is, let's see if we can proceed on this way. Expressions of interest might be called from commercial operations and so on to find those new uses for those buildings. A model that's worked in other parts of the city, other parts, is that tenants' upgrade costs could be offset by a rent holiday, meaning that there is no actual financial outlay for the council. It might take some time to get that to happen. Let's not just do it once, let's try it and then try it again in a year's time if we don't get a satisfactory result. And thank you over there. We would like to just be considered a consultation party in whatever happens.
Thank you very much for that presentation and for putting those suggestions forward to us. Is there any questions from members of Alan or Galen? Brady, Councillor Dodd.
Thank you. From the Rotary's position, are both the buildings here of the same level to you, or is one more important than the other?
From a Rotary point of view, the Tutakiwi is the one that we built. The other one is a partner. And if you're going to consider our proposal, it should apply to both. Yeah.
Okay. Any Councillor Shaw?
Firstly, thank you for your gift to the city of the two buildings. It's wonderful.
It wasn't mine.
Yeah, the Rotary
We still
gift
have
to the
people in
city.
the club who were there, like,
Yeah.
50 years ago.
Yeah, you know, I remember the Ridderford Gardens and the swimming pool and all that sort of thing, the fountain that used to be there. So you're proposing that we look at external people to run something that would be suitable, not yourselves at the moment?
No, it's got to be a commercial proposition for somebody to front up with the cost to bring it up to standard and then get their return from operating it.
I've just been through Central Park in New York, and I think it's a really beautiful example of what can be done in a Munster. So thank you for your presentation.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you very much. And just to let you know as well, it will be my intention when we come to these matters a little bit later on when we give some direction, that no decision is made until that engagement has occurred with the club. And just wanted to give you that reassurance and acknowledge the importance of your long involvement with those buildings.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, moving now through to Chris Norton and Lillian Park as well, if you're both speaking on behalf of Nainai Trust. Or separate? Separate, okay, so we'll go Chris first. No problem.
All right, kia ora koutou. Ko Chris Norton, tōku ingoa. Yeah, I notice in my in the schedule there, I'm listed to speak as Team Nainai Trust, and I did put in a submission on behalf of Team Nainai Trust, and I also put in a personal one. They are quite different, actually. And I'm quite happy to make a very short comment about my personal one, and then hand over the rest of the time to Lillian to take up the Team Nainai submission. Hers was the substantive one, and mine was largely in a support role to that submission. So really my comment is contained in the bit towards the end where I ask the question if this is a climate sensitized annual plan. And the reason I ask that is because I did note that the scope of feedback was quite limited this time around. I understand why, because we're at the end of the long-term cycle, the 3-year cycle. But it's one of the things that Council does need to keep in mind as it progresses with its cost refinement exercise, is how much does what we're doing continue to bend the curve on emissions? And that's really my question there. And as I say, if it is, then we're on the right track. If it's not doing as much as it can, then we perhaps need to reconsider how we're doing that. And there is this thing called the Climate Change Response Act of 2002, Section 3, and I hassle my employer about this as well, because they're a Crown entity, is are we doing all we can to meet our obligations under that particular section, which is the 1.5 degrees, etc., for the Paris Agreement. I make a couple of comments further up about the Esplanade, changes to the Esplanade road project, and I think there's an example there where the decision is being made about delaying a mode implementation, and to my mind, we need to really think about what that decision means in terms of our emissions profile for the city. So there's a couple of things there to consider, and unless anybody has any questions, I'm now quite prepared to, what do they say? Release my time and move to Team Nainai Trust.
Any questions, Councillor Mitchell?
Yeah, just as a point of clarification, Chris, the submission that we received in writing began with, is this a climate sensitized annual plan? It sounds like, from what you're saying, it's the end of your submission. Are we missing part of your submission? There's no mention of the Esplanade or...
Oh, no, it was the question that you popped up about the change in...
Oh, okay, so you answered it as a question.
Yeah, it was one of the ones way
Thank you, I
up the
just
top
thought we
there.
might be missing something.
Yeah, no.
Thanks.
No.
Okay, if there's no other questions, then yeah, great. So Lillian, if you'd like to come forward as well.
Come join me.
We'll reset the clock and we'll even give you an extra 30 seconds, given you
really
gave us some time back. So,
Everybody knows I talk a lot, so, okay.
over to you.
So, kia ora koutou katoa, ko Lily tōku ingoa. I'm Lillian and I'm a resident of Nainai, if you don't know, and I'm also the chair of Team Nainai Trust. So I wanted to say that Team Nainai Trust supports Council's goal of Te Awa Kairangi ki Tai Lower Hutt being a city where everyone thrives, and we support Council's commitment of doing this through a pathway of partnership, collaboration, and support. And so we're actually here to ask Council to partner with and support Nainai, in particular with Team Nainai Trust. As you guys are probably aware, the closure of the community hall and the Olympic pool has had a huge effect on Hillary Court. We've had a lot of businesses close, and over the past few years, we have seen a deterioration of the vibrancy of Hillary Court. And we know that a lot of the groups that are still in Nainai would like to see Hillary Court become vibrant again, vibrant and energetic and full of life. We know that it will happen when the pool opens, but that won't be rebuilt and open for quite some time. I know that the businesses in Hillary Court are asking for support. They are stressed. Some of them that haven't closed are on the brink of closing, and a few said they don't know if they can make it until the pool opens. So it's affecting the morale of the community, of the business community, and so on. So basically what we're asking for is support for Nainai Village Market in particular. We know that the businesses have told us that when we have the market on, we get a lot of people through and they see the benefits of that. So people do come shop at their shops when they come to the market. So we are asking for funding for Nainai Market for at least another financial year. So it used to be 23,000, but with the cost of living and living wage going up, we're asking for 30,000. We're also asking for overhead cover or rain or sun sales so that the market can be viable during winter months. Because when it's cold and wet and windy, it's terrible. It's very miserable out there. And no one wants to come out. So I can show you pictures some other time of the ones that you can see in Asia. They're very effective. And we are also hoping that we can work with council to support people in the community who want to be vendors. So we've had quite a few people in the community become vendors and we've helped them along, but we think we need more perhaps training or community programs, help with things like filling out food license forms, which I can tell you are not easy, and even simple business training, even like learning how to design a logo or doing accounting, because some of our vendors don't know about money in, money out, profit and loss. And so things like that. So that's basically what we're asking for. Is that my 3 minutes?
Thank you. Any other questions from councillors? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Lillian. So of the range of activities that you've kind of put in your written submission and spoke to today, have you had conversations with officers about any of them and how they progressed and what's still in the pipeline?
So we have asked about support for the market, and this was last year, and we were told that it would only be for 1 year, and that would be the end of it. So that was really disappointing because we had asked if we could have further funding till the pool opens, because that's kind of where we need it. We don't want Hillary Court to become a complete desert before the pool opens. Yeah. In terms of funding, we are getting funding. We know that council only has so much funding. And so with our other programs and stuff, we are applying for funding from other groups and agencies. Because I know that before we used to get about 35,000 a year. Now we get 10 if we're lucky. So we are making do and finding other sources and sponsorships and so on. And we've become a donee organization with IRD as well.
Councillor Dye?
Yeah, just with your involvement with the businesses, do you know, are they seeing an impact of the construction of the pools now starting, the old post office is about to, I'm assuming that's bringing a lot of tradies and people into the area as well. Is that having an impact on them?
Oh gosh, because...
Anecdotally, it's flatlined rather than continue to decline.
Yeah, so it's plateaued.
Plateau's a better word.
Yes, it's plateaued. Yeah, I know.
Yes.
Like we don't want Hillary Court to die,
Yeah.
but we know that there was a sharp decline in the businesses. Well, I don't want to name them for commercial sensitivity reasons, but we're saying that they're really struggling. I know some of the suppliers that supply goods to some of the shops, and they're saying they're on I can't remember, like on credit, so they can't get supplies in. They have to pay up, or they can't get credit, so they have to pay up front, and they're struggling with that. And so I am aware that a couple more may shut within the next 12, 18 months if we don't do something.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate your presentation, and we will come back on those particular requests that you have made. Yep. Okay, so now we have the Living Wage Network. Lillian, you're down again, but you're a placeholder for a crew as well, including yourself, of course. Yep.
I think I can read that really quickly. Kia ora koutou katoa.
Oh, so you're speaking to this one as well?
Yeah!
Oh, there you go. Many hats. No, absolutely.
I have
no
so
problem.
many hats. I should have a bigger head. But kia ora koutou katoa. I'm still Lillian. So I'm also a member of the Hutt Valley Living Wage Network, and I'm on 2 community-based charitable trusts that are accredited living wage employers. So we This group still supports, so we support the council's goal of Te Awa Kairangi ki Tai, Lower Hutt being a city where everyone thrives, and we support the council's commitment to doing this through partnership, collaboration, and support. So we also are aware that Hutt City Council proposes to achieve its purpose or goals with the current economic climate and the rise of cost of living front of mind, and by maintaining financial stability. So we believe that this should also include the economic well-being of the residents of Lower Hutt. So a city where everyone thrives is where its residents are able to afford to live with dignity, participate in their communities, and improve their physical, emotional, and mental well-being. So basically, there is no city if residents can't afford to live here. So there are numerous benefits to paying the living wage. For example, workers who are paid the living wage are more productive. When people on low income have more discretionary income, they spend it locally, on businesses locally, and this stimulates the economy. The job turnover is reduced, and there's no perceptible growth in unemployment through raising the wages of those workers on the lowest rates. So we can provide all the academic research if you'd like. On behalf of the Hutt Valley Living Wage Network, we ask that Hutt City Council maintains the living wage rate for its directly employed workforce, that council maintains the living wage for workers employed by contractors, that council maintains its accreditation as a living wage employer. So also want to say yay that you guys did it in 2021, and that the council continues to work with us, the Hutt Valley Living Wage Network, to make Lower Hutt, a living wage city as declared at one of your council living wage events in 2021. We also want to take this opportunity to remind council that being an accredited living wage employer has numerous benefits. So for example, it provides certainty to ratepayers that their funds are not contributing to low wages, but instead are enhancing the quality of life of individuals in their communities. That it provides living wage employees at Hutt City Council with a certainty that each year their pay will be adjusted according to the timeframes outlined by the living wage movement. And having been a Hutt City Council employee in the past, I know how important it is to the staff here. It sends a strong signal throughout the community and Hutt City Council's procurement pipeline that the council is committed to the concept of a living wage and the calculations that underpin it, and to championing it throughout Lower Hutt and also the Wellington region. So I like that we're first. So lastly, accreditation ensures that a living wage is paid in the long term at the Hutt City Council. This means that the council will be required to take positive steps each year to ensure that staff who meet the criteria for accreditation are paid a living wage. So I wanted to finish off with something personal. And I wanted to say, keep up the good work to Hutt City Council. I'm really proud, super proud to be a resident of this city because it values its employees by being an accredited living wage employer. And that's really important to me. And that it uplifts the residents of the city by taking steps to make Te Awa Kairangi ki Tai, hopefully, the first living wage city in Aotearoa, New Zealand. That's it.
Thank you so much, Lillian, and I know I can speak on behalf of the council unanimously of how proud we are to be a living wage employer and to be accredited. You know, you have the full support of that from every single person around this table, and that's pretty awesome. But I'll open up for any questions. Councillor Brown.
Kia ora, Lily, thank you for that. It's really, we're in huge support of living wage, and I think we speak that, but we act it as well. And I've always been a supporter of making the whole city living wage, but it's interesting that just your speech just before was about the struggling businesses. How do we, and I'm genuinely interested, how do we support businesses that there's numerous around that are in that space? How do we bring living wage into that same conversation?
I think with the businesses in Hillary Court, most of them are owner-operated, so they're self-employed. And that's a whole different thing. But I know that, for example, for one of the businesses that is employing staff, they are an accredited living wage employer. So they acknowledge that, and they are, like the businesses in Lower Hutt, in Nainai, are trying to make those changes. And having run a business locally until recently, I can tell you that it is doable. And I think if you cannot give your staff the dignity of getting the living wage and being able to live comfortably and have a bit of discretionary income, then perhaps you need to hit one of the boot camps that council runs for businesses. It is doable. And I think it's just, you make the commitment and you make the adjustments to make it work.
Any other questions? Councillor Dyer, I'll go Councillor Parkin, then Councillor Dyer.
Kara, thank you for your presentation, Lillian. Just wondering if you can fill us in a little bit on the steps that are required for the Living Wage City and where we're at within that progress and what we can do as council to help that.
I'll defer to Finn.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I think the key steps that you can continue to do is by actively promoting it. So making sure that it is public knowledge that Hutt City Council has stepped up to pay the living wage. Or that also been going into partnership events by bringing together businesses from the Hutt and allowing many of our accredited employers that span this city to sort of articulate why they're accredited and how they got there and how they made that work. So that's a key thing we'd like to see the Hutt City Council champion.
I'd just like to say I now work in Wellington, and a lot of my colleagues, I have a lot of colleagues, about 4,000 colleagues, they often move around, or they're buying their first house, or they're looking to where to move to. And I always tell them to come to Lower Hutt. There's a lot of benefits, including that this council is an accredited living wage employer and has the right kind of philosophy and direction that people should be looking for. I promoted a lot. I think I should get a marketing budget.
Yeah. Councillor Dyer.
I have the exact same question. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you so much again, and we absolutely will continue working together. That is a commitment that you do have from us, so you can keep up the good work on your end.
So I should have acknowledged everybody at the beginning, but here's our crew.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we now have Mike Fisher, Petone Community Board, and also Kaz Yon. Great. So team, great to have you around the table. And you have a total of around 10 minutes. We'll ding the bell when that time is up, but if you obviously would like to leave time for questions as well, you don't feel free to use that whole 10. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and good afternoon, councillors. I think I just heard Councillor Dyer say, "Where's our banner?" I actually had written that down, that I should have bought one saying "Save Petone Wharf." Next time, maybe. Thank you. You've got your submission in front of you that we've written. It probably doesn't tell you anything that you haven't heard from us on previous meetings we've had over the last few months. But just to reiterate, we thought we'd make the point and just highlight a few issues there for you. And I guess the key thing is we acknowledge that striking the balance for you is not going to be easy. But unfortunately, that's the political tightrope that you have to walk. You know, we know that you've got to make savings in certain areas, but equally the city has facilities and issues that need the money. So it's not going to be easy, and we know you have a difficult task. Obviously, something we've spoken to you many times about is Petone Wharf. It is a very difficult issue. On one side, you've got people who say, well, let's save the money, we can't afford anything at the moment, let's demolish it, through to we need to save and restore it. We know that the Petone Project Steering Group has the wharf as one of its items that it'll be discussing, and we know money has been allocated in the interim to keep the wharf in some state of repair while the deferment till 2029, 2030 that is proposed takes place. We would just say, well, okay, we accept that this is probably going to happen, but ideally we would like to see it advanced in some form of restoration much sooner, but we appreciate there's work to be done to achieve that. We just note that every effort should be made to perhaps look at alternative funding options and make sure that any engineering is peer reviewed, and that we must keep some money aside, which may need to be increased, you know, if we have adverse weather effects or unfortunately earthquakes or anything else that might happen that we're not expecting. So yeah, big issue for us. The other one that I wanted to highlight before passing to Kaz was just the cross-valley connections and micromobility. Obviously, there's a lot of work in either in Petone or leading to or from Petone with cycleways, and it ties in with the wharf because really it's a central meeting point there as well. We just want to reiterate yet again, which we have been doing and did so again at our last meeting, that while we support these various connections and looking at all our methods of transport, the key thing is good consultation, because we know this is going to be controversial. Some of these cycleways and pathways are going to be very much what people have been concerned about, and equally there'll be others who are championing their cause. So we want to make sure that there's plenty of time for consultation for those things to happen. So that's me, Kaz.
Kia ora, everyone. So although this is about the annual plan, this sets us up very importantly for long-term plan. And I guess I want to throw in this term mokopuna decisions. It's really important for us to be thinking not just right now in this 1 year, but also how that sets us up for the future. And so with this comes factoring in being good kaitiaki, ensuring we have resilient, strong and healthy communities for now, the next few years and well beyond for all our lifetimes. This includes climate resilience. There's no surprise of the vulnerabilities that we in Pitaone face when it comes to climate change and sea level rise. And although it's not explicit in our written submission, we have harped on about it for a long time, and it should underpin all of our decisions. No surprises to many of you that other than climate, communities is the other thing I want to stress. Whanaungatanga and that connection with people, our people, is so important. We're recognising the balancing this council has to consider, particularly with the challenges of a cost of living crisis. But a huge part of that is also ensuring that the communications that help our people is incredibly important. We need to ensure that we bring our people along with us, allowing opportunity for our people to be and stay engaged, particularly when it is challenging and difficult. And I guess one of the key things around that is it's really important that we're also striking the balance of getting stuff done, but also ensuring people are with us and know what's going on. And so I really want to emphasise how important it is to cast the vision and helping people understand that vision so that they're also part of the story as well. Kia ora.
Thank you so much, Mike and Kaz. Really appreciate it as per usual. And I'll just see if there's any questions from Councillor Mitchell.
Tēnā korua, and thank you for your presentation and to the rest of the board for their input as well. There's one item on our agenda later this afternoon that wasn't in the annual plan consultation because it's more of a recent development, I guess, which is Moira Library and a bit of change to the proposal there. I was wondering if the board is kind of on top of that and has come up with a position on Moira Library.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. Yes, that has been raised with us, and we had a informal discussion with officers in the last fortnight. That is a very exciting proposal. One of the things I was going to mention was, and I have mentioned previously, that we need to counter perceptions that Petone is missing out, that we need to see something that we can say to residents, hey, this is what's going on there if you look at issues like the wharf. And that actually is a good example of something we can point to, that here's a proposal that has come up for Moira Library. The board were very much of the view that, hey, look, we would like to support this. It sounds like a good concept. The inevitable questions that we started raising were around resilience. Is it planned for future, changes, flooding, whatever? And yes, it seemed to tick all the boxes, this early preliminary work. So yeah, we are in favour of it, and it's good to see. That would be one tick that we can put there, that we can say that that's something that's being done. And particularly for, our residents that live on that side of the river, because, quite often that can be forgotten about. So that's good to see. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Any further comment?
I guess I just want to reiterate what I said around how we can communicate that to our people. I think it's a really important question, and it's really important for us to make sure that we do help people understand why we're doing what we're doing, because there's some huge benefits in that proposal. But there's also a lot of passion and history that goes with that, and some of that's positive, some of it's negative. And I think it is really important that all of us, whether that be the board, whether that be you as councillors and the mayor and officers, all work together to ensure that our people and our communities are part of that journey.
So we've got Councillor Briggs, Councillor Park and Councillor Shaw.
Thank you both. And so on Petone Wharf, and there was no mention in the written submission or verbal today around the challenge of sustainability of materials and particularly the environmental impact of sourcing hardwoods. Did you have any feedback from your community during the annual plan process as a board, or any discussions as a board as to your position around that and how that impacts on your kind of advocacy for the wharf's future?
Nice, easy question. Not specifically, but I know over the many years that the wharf has come up, that this is one of the things, and I think that's why I also highlighted that mention about peer review, that, you know, there might be options that, for example, in layman's terms, use more concrete in parts that are perfectly acceptable, as opposed to a restoration like for like. And so that if hardwood supplies from sustainable hardwood supplies from certain areas are not available or difficult or more expensive, that, you know, every alternative is looked at. I guess that would be my answer to that without getting into specifics, because there are as many opinions on Petone Wharf as there are residents. So I think, for example, if you were to say, yes, we're going to save the wharf in some form, then that's the sort of discussion we'd have. And if it is some form of construction other than what we've got at the moment, then that might be perfectly acceptable, if that answers the question.
Councillor Parker.
Kia ora, thank you for your submission. Again, on Petone Wharf, we've just had an interesting conversation with Rotary and the conservatory, repurposing of the conservatory within the council grounds. Has anybody in the community talked about potential business plans or income streams that could be sourced from the Petone Wharf? I know that I think I've heard the ferries have been ruled out as an alternative form of transport from that location, but I'm wondering if there are any other potential businesses that are a source of income stream and therefore a better return on investment, as well as the social good that the wharf does.
Not specifically, but again, over the years, many people have suggested various options, from something akin to Brighton Pavilion to you know, a cafe, or perhaps bike hire, or some small business that operates from a base maybe at the foot of the wharf, and in conjunction with, you know, changes to the esplanade and our new cycle pathways, you know, there is considerable potential for something like that to be looked at, I would have thought. But yeah, nothing specific that I know of at the moment, but you can see that there is potential.
Councillor Shaw.
Also on the Petone Wharf, and thanks for your presentation. And I may have mentioned this before, and as you say, Petone Wharf is quite iconic. Have you ever considered forming a Save the Wharf campaign, and encourage getting a banner, and forming a group, shoulder tapping philanthropists, various others that might be really interested in coming on board?
Yeah, good point, Councillor. And I think that's reached I know previously, you know, various parties, political and otherwise, have formed a sort of Save Our Wharf petitions and things like that. I suspect as we move to the next round in the long-term plan, and depending on any decisions you make in the next few hours, assuming there's no changes, I think that would be one of the next steps. But also, because we've got the Petone steering group ongoing, this is something, you know, crystal ball gazing, perhaps over the next 6 months, we'll see that, you know, there may be some group like that form, but hence my also making that point there that we need to look at all the options, you know, philanthropy or funding, whatever we want from various sources, just to see if there is further ways of, you know, saving the wharf is the bottom line. But yeah, thank you for that suggestion. That hasn't been forgotten.
Okay, no final questions? No, thank you very much again for a really good presentation, and given how also active you've both been throughout this process, it's been fantastic, so really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you. Okay, moving through to Jerry Pallop. Jerry, welcome. Welcome, Jerry. Good to see you. Now, you have a total of 5 minutes. Please feel free to use as much or as little as that as you like, and then also within that, questions from the floor that may arise. So over to you, Jerry.
Good. Thank you for the welcome, Mr. Mayor. My name is Gary Pallow. I'm a retired consulting engineer. I've lived in Lower Hutt for over 60 years and have previously served on the Eastern Ward Committee and as a chairman of that committee for a period. I'd just like to make two fairly short points. The first point is about infrastructure investment. On reading the plan, I'm a bit disappointed to see the number of areas in the plan where there seems to have been deterioration in assets, possibly due to insufficient maintenance in the past. I mean, while budgeting, balancing the budgets is always a difficult task, so too is the prioritisation where to use available funding in the best long-term interests. Major infrastructure is a long-term asset that is the key to the orderly development of every community. It needs ongoing maintenance. If it is underfunded, it will deteriorate. And we've heard about that, about the Petone Wharf just in the prior discussion. So my request to all of you is when you're finalising this plan in the next few hours, to recognise the importance of prioritising infrastructure expenditure and so thereby help to avoid the shortcomings of earlier councils in possibly underfunding some of these long-term assets. Now the second point is a more specific one, and it relates to the submissions I made to the plan regarding the Cross-Valley connections. I have made submissions to Council on a number of occasions on the subject, as I regard it as the most important roading infrastructure project needed to take traffic congestion off places like the Esplanade and Cuba and Victoria Streets in order to gain access to a bridge over the river. This will only get worse as more houses are built, especially with extensive planned developments like in Wainuiomata. The traffic from there already has a major choke point at the Woburn intersection, which could easily be eased with an east-west cross-valley connection. This connector is vital for the interconnection of the east and west sides of the Lower Valley, not only for normal commercial and domestic traffic, but also under emergency conditions. As the Mayor highlighted in a recent item in the Post, if a storm like Gabriel was to occur over the Tararuas in the Hutt Valley, the city would suffer severe flooding. A storm of that magnitude could make the estuary bridge, for example, impassable or even destroy it. The ongoing consequences of this would be immense, both for immediate recovery and longer term for commercial operations. I believe this connector is key to the longer term orderly development of the Hutt Valley, and it's a case of when rather than if it is needed. Hence, in my submission, I consider that it's essential that there is sufficient provision included in the plan to enable a likely route corridor to be designated on the district plan, so property owners present and future can make informed risk analyses of their investments. I believe the time is now long past for the council to make a firm commitment on this project, and taking this action to designate a route would be an essential first step towards this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you so much, Gary. Really appreciate it. Is there any questions from councillors? No, I think you've put a good challenge to us there, and we'll receive further advice, particularly around the district plan designation issue, because as you may well be aware as well, we are going through that full district plan review, so your suggestion there is a timely one for us to consider. Thank you very much. Okay, now we did have a few other late withdrawals from speakers. So next up we have Paul Duffin. Look at that timing. You've had to come all the way from down the hall. No, great stuff. So Paul will, you know how it works. We've got 5 minutes and we'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. Get this out. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Duffin and I'm the president of the Hutt Sister City Foundation, and I'm here on behalf of our volunteer board. To my right is Sir Shirley Williams, who was one of almost the first board members, and their daughter did the exchange in 1986. I'll carry on. We cannot see anything in the annual plan regarding continuing support of our important sister city relationships. These relationships foster goodwill and many opportunities with like-minded international cities. For our youth in particular, they develop future leadership potential. While we do expect our delegates to contribute to fundraising, we are asking for a consideration of $12,500 per annum to allow us to meet our obligations and continue to promote Hutt City. We are more than willing to fundraise, but without the support from Council, it would be very challenging to continue to operate as we do. Our Sister City program has been going for more than 40 years, and we have a great reputation, both locally and internationally. Tempe uses our program as a model other sister cities should base their program on. Next year, we're looking forward to hosting a delegation from Tempe, Arizona. They place great value on our sister city relationships, and we want to show them ours in the best way we can. I trust you'll look favourably on our submission. Are there any questions?
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Paul. Can you give us an update on how much each delegate tends to raise towards the cost of their airfares and so forth to the states?
Sure. So they get, at this stage, $1,000 per person. They have to raise the rest, and they also have to raise a considerable sum to entertain the American students who come here, because in America, it doesn't cost them a cent to go to the Grand Canyon, Disneyland, Universal Studios. So we have to raise the funds to entertain them throughout our country, North and South Island.
Other questions? Did I see a hand over here? Councillor Edwards.
I just wanted to thank you for the work you're doing. It was interesting this morning. We had a Wainui Community Ward member say that a sister city trip she did to Tempe was life-changing. So thanks for the work you do. But so all of this $12,500 goes towards students helping to meet their cost of exchanges, or are there other uses for that?
There are other uses as well. We have obligations as well to pay for memberships to the sister city organisation, advertising for our board through the paper. We have educators who we are struggling to get at the moment to travel to Arizona, and their airfares are a bit more. They get $1,500 because they travel at Christmas time when the fares are at a peak. So not only do the students get it, the educators, which could include kindergarten teachers, secondary school teachers, primary school teachers, and we are now looking at branching out to police and fire service coming from Arizona here as well, and us sending them to Arizona.
Just got Deputy Mayor Lewis, Councillor Dyer, Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Paul, for the presentation, and it's good to see you on this topic. How many schools do you approach? Is it open for all schools to do Sister City?
Every Hutt's secondary school, from this side of the Silverstream Bridge to everything in the Hutt Valley. The criteria is they are in year 11 to go in year 12, year 12 to go in year 13. They must live and go to school in the Hutt Valley. For instance, you live in Horakiwi, you can't do it. Hutt-based only.
Councillor Dyer.
The same question as Councillor Edwards.
Okay. Councillor Shaw.
Thank you, Paul. Just my question is, do we have links with other cities as well as Tempe? Or?
We do have Mino City, yes. We have a sister city in Laredo, Texas, which is dormant. There is one more in Hwasong in Korea, and there are friendship cities. They're all on the board downstairs. I have to refresh my mind all the time.
Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Paul. From memory, these activities were curtailed a bit, of course, because of COVID.
Yes.
Can you just remind us kind of what the pre-COVID situation was in terms of a funding agreement with council?
We used to get $12,500 a year. Prior to COVID, we had 3 students who were working furiously to get to Arizona. Of course, that didn't happen. They didn't get any of our money. That money stayed in our account. It wasn't dished out, just here you go, have it. They got what they fundraised. And they had fundraised about $18,000 between 3 families. One of these families could have written a check for it, for their student, and we said, no, you work as a group. You get to go, because they're from all different schools, all different classes and everything. It was great. It's just how these people get to work together.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. We will consider your request, and we'll certainly be coming back direct as well if there's any further questions.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, next we have Matt Wills from Cricket Wellington. Welcome, Matt. Got the team there. Great.
Kia ora. First and foremost, thank you very much for the opportunity to come and present. It's greatly appreciated. So yeah, as Mayor Barry mentioned, I'm Matt Wills. I'm Head of Community Cricket at Cricket Wellington. I've got some stuff I'll quickly run through, then happy to take some questions. Conscious it's a long day for you all. So firstly, Cricket Wellington is responsible for the administration, promotion and development of cricket across the Wellington region. Our mission is to create outstanding cricket experiences for Wellingtonians. It's been a huge season for us. We've had the under-17 girls, under-17, under-19 men's, under-19 women's, and Blaze all win national titles. So Wellington really is on the world stage. And that includes Mealy Kerr, Devon Conway, Sophie Devine, Tom Blundell, some real idols. To maximise these opportunities, our clubs continue with our support to prioritise community cricket. This is evident in our strategic plan that focuses on youth and female cricket, coach and umpire development, player pathways, and of course, capability. Highlights from the season have included us seeing 15,000 youth rangatahi and tamariki, giving them entry-level exposure to cricket. We have just under 8,000 people playing cricket on a weekly basis. That's those aged 4 all the way through to a gentleman who's 80 still playing club cricket, which is pretty impressive. Another big highlight for us is our cultural diversity engagement. So we ran a multicultural backyard cricket festival at the Basin with 15 diverse communities that aren't traditionally engaged in cricket. So we are committed to really trying to push the boat out and get as far and wide as possible. To ensure our membership is heard, we did recently engage with them to understand what their priorities are. And the second biggest priority was facilities. That's facilities both on and off the field, and what we can do in partnership with our councils and clubs to improve them. That's alongside some insights from the Sport NZ Voice of Participants survey, which said similar things. The second and third greatest priorities for participants to improve their experience, again, on and off field facilities. Before I move into the long-term plan itself, I just want to acknowledge the strength of our partnership. Some of the people on the ground who do great stuff for the council and our members, Joe Davian, Aaron Marsh from Mexteds, and of course, would be rude to not mention John McKesser at the Petone Rec. The Petone Rec this year won the Ground of the Year across our entire Wellington catchment. So that's kudos to John and the effort that the council and all your staff has put in. What we do know, evidence indicates that high quality facilities contribute to positive participation outcomes and healthier societies. Healthier societies is a stated outcome for the Hutt City Council. As noted, with 8,000 registered participants and 15,000 people getting a touch point to cricket, we're confident that we, as Cricket Wellington, play a fundamental role in the well-being of our society. Facilities in the Hutt City Council region and across Wellington, to be fair, are under considerable strain. That includes both grass and artificial wickets. And as we know, in terms of off-field facilities, there are some antiquated facilities across the region, a shortage of gender-neutral changing facilities and toilets. So what Cricket Wellington requests of the Hutt City Council? We seek your support to ensure that we continue to work collaboratively and take an evidence-based approach to the development and maintenance of facilities under the Council's guardianship. Specifically, we implore you to consider the following priorities when developing your annual plan. Partner with us, Cricket Welling, to increase the quantity and quality of on and off field facilities. Partner with us to establish minimum standards for upkeep and maintenance, and continue to provide us that forum to request capital projects and improvements, the likes of Nino Park, Delaney Park. A great example in recent years is the Rock Centre out at Fraser Park, which is a fantastic asset. We do understand as an organisation there is a strain on facilities across the region, and we're doing our best to think outside the box, play cricket on Wednesdays, Mondays, Tuesdays, Sundays to try and really spread that load. And we're looking to partner with codes and colleges to, again, decrease that burden. Additionally, we continue to invest significantly across the wider Wellington region. Just under 200,000 goes into ground fees and maintenance, with approximately 60,000 for the Hutt City Council remit region. Sport plays a fundamental role in keeping our communities active and engaged, and we look forward to continuing to partner with Hutt City Council to offer participants the opportunity to play the game that we love in a safe and enjoyable environment. I'd like to thank you for your time and ongoing support, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions? Councillor Stallinger, then Councillor Shaw, Councillor Mitchell.
Thanks, mate. Just a bit more information on the pressure on the pitches and facilities. Is that increasing because the facilities themselves are deteriorating, or there's increased participation, or some other reason? Could you just expand a bit more?
So it's generally been an increase in participation. So last year we did see a rise in that senior space particularly. So that's around 2020 cricket, that more, I'm not going to call it super modified, but that shorter, sharp opportunity. So we are in the Hutt City area. I think from memory it was 5 wickets short, and that of course forces us to send people out to Upper Hutt or to Porirua. And that's a problem for both Wellington City and Hutt City.
Councillor Shaw.
Thanks for the great report, Matt. My question is, do you capture people from the Greater Wellington region, like Hutt Valley, Kapiti, Wairarapa, Porirua as well? So you represent all of the councils?
Yes, our remit as Cricket Wellington goes to the foot of the Rimatakas, so we don't capture the Kapiti coast or the Wairarapa. So we work with obviously Hutt City Council, Upper Hutt Council, Wellington City and Porirua City. So it's a bit of a unique makeup compared to some other codes.
Thank you.
Councillor Mitchell.
And my question was just one of clarification. The 8,000 players and 15,000 active participants, is that here in Lower Hutt, or is that across that whole?
Sorry, that's across the entire region, across Wellington.
Thank you.
Just one question, and I'll go to Councillor Dyer. So I'm not sure if you're aware, Matt, but we're doing a review into sports grounds and assets review and the likes. Quite a significant piece of work which has been planned for some time. And just really an invitation and checking to see a willingness from Cricket Wellington to engage with us on that to ensure we sort of look through all these different issues, and just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I know it's a bit of a hot potato at the moment, and we're certainly keen to be involved with that. But I guess from our perspective and our codes around Wellington with reference to the affordable sports, is we do want that to be independent. That's not to say we wouldn't be involved in the Hutt City Council's process, but our strong preference is to be independent across all 4 councils with a review.
But you're still happy to
I don't see why we wouldn't.
Just checking that.
Nah, cool.
Councillor Dyer.
Yeah, your second point under what's needed from Hutt City Council talks about establishing minimum standards. Are most of the fields far away from what you'd expect to be minimum now, or is it just, what's the reason for wanting that in there?
It's a tough one. It's a mixed bag. I think at the higher level, those that are playing at a more competitive level, the standards are pretty good and pretty reasonable. It's more down the grades where people might be playing more socially on a Saturday afternoon, and some of those grounds do get a little less love and attention. So it's more about how we can work together to ensure those ones are lifted to a standard that's not going to harm opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that covers all the questions. Appreciate your time, Matt.
Cool, thank you very much.
Our final speaker for today, Sylvia Allen. Welcome, Sylvia. Speaking on behalf of the Petone Historical Society.
Thank you.
We have 5 minutes, and over to you.
Sure. So we made a very brief submission on 2 aspects. The first is the deferral of work on the Cross Valley Link. And at the moment in Petone, we experience a lot of gridlock, and it's only going to get worse. We can see that. It's affecting, you know, our kind of freedom to move around, and also affecting our local economy, particularly in the weekends. It's really, really bad. We'd like to see the council determine a route and protect it, because the longer you delay choosing a route, the more expensive it's going to get. And it's not just for traffic, but it's for other infrastructure. And we're also very aware of sea level rise and the number of infrastructure routes that run along the Esplanade area, and the need, you know, they will need to be relocated over the next 50 years. So again, it seems like a sound investment to protect a route as soon as possible. And, you know, it'll give the city greater resilience, and it'll be a different city in 50 years' time. So we're really keen that you don't sit on your hands too long on that. The second issue, sorry, I was very interested to hear Gary saying exactly the same thing. I didn't know that he was going to say that, but he says it with a bit more authority than the Petone Historical Society. Yeah, we sit in Petone and we helplessly watch the deterioration of our wharf. It's one of our most loved features. It's been in the past very well used recreationally, and it's been used by people who don't do organised sports, you know, family groups, immigrant communities, people who just want to go and fish off the end of the wharf. It's been shut for several years now. It's going to tie in with a new cycle route and be a feature on that route if we can get it open again. And so much money has been spent on that we're really, really sorry that some money can't be found to retain our wharf and get it open sooner. We've always seen the potential future use for transport and also for civil defence for our wharf. We've seen a lot of money spent on two wharves at Eastbourne, which are a great deal less accessible to the regional community than ours, and to the Hutt Valley community, and have always been less well used. We feel a bit like the poor relation. So, and our suggestion is that some work could be done now, particularly taking the surface off the wharf, which is an extra weight that the piles are bearing at the moment. We know that the conservation plan and to conserve the wharf in a strict heritage way is going to cost an awful lot of money, and we do understand that could be something that's looked at for the next long-term plan. But we just, and we wouldn't be opposed to concrete piles, for instance, rather than imported rainforest piles. And, you know, it does need looking at, but yeah, we would like to see we're sorry to see all that budget lost now, and the long deferment, 6 years deferment of work on the wharf is a really long time for people. So that's really our 2 points that we wish to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Is there any questions? Councillor Park and Councillor Mitchell.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation. You mentioned transportation and the use of the wharf for transportation. Could you elaborate on that? My understanding is that the ferry services were not keen to use this, and as an alternative method, the addition of the cycleway and walking pathway, there's going to be a reduced demand. So I'm just wondering if you can shed some light on what you're seeing as the transportation.
So we have always seen it as a possible ferry option. We don't know why ferries aren't keen. With a new electric ferry, it would be very easy to use that area. So we just see it as an option, another option in the range of options.
So have you talked to the ferry services about why they're not keen on using it?
No, we didn't know they weren't keen on using it.
Cool. Yeah, it's something that I'll need to follow up, but I suggest that that's the same thing.
Yes.
Councillor Mitchell, Deputy Mayor Loss.
Thank you, Sylvia. This is a technical question that you might not know the answer to, but you mentioned a suggestion of removing the concrete deck, which I understand from your submission was proposed, I assume as part of a full restoration of the wharf. Was there any suggestion in that report that it could also serve as an interim measure, which is more what you're suggesting now, that it would be appropriate to do that?
I think it's one of the stages in the conservation plan, and I think it was a relatively early stage, which is why we're suggesting it.
Yeah, I guess I'd just be curious on whether that maybe compromised the structural integrity of what was left there, if it was still going to be left for a longer period. I really don't know.
No, I'm pretty sure. It's a while since I've looked at the conservation plan, but it definitely didn't compromise anything. It was actually intended to have the opposite effect, to actually help the load bearing a bit of the piles that are still there.
Thank you, Sylvia. And you actually did answer a question in your statement about I'm going to clarify it now. The Petone Historical Society wouldn't be, they would be okay if it went to concrete foundations or concrete pipes?
We're open to it. You know, we think that heritage should be able to be used, and you don't always have to keep every last artefact. You know, there's a lot of reuse of buildings that doesn't require complete reinstatement of structures and things like that as they were. So we'd like to see an adaptive response probably rather than a purist heritage response.
And the other comment was around public transport, and at the moment it has been, the ferry company has said no to it. But would you think that the pretty now statement and not future thinking statement in light of population growth?
Yeah, it very much depends on what happens with State Highway 2 and how many people can be diverted onto the cycleway and what the train capacity is. It's just another option to keep open, in my opinion. The ferry works well at Days Base, so taking a ferry to Petone, don't see why you shouldn't be able to do that. Parking, of course, you know, if it's park and ride, but the resident population, I think, would probably use a ferry if they had a chance.
No other questions? Thank you so much, Sylvia. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Okay, great. Well, we are bang on time, which is great. So well done, everyone. We've got a few minutes to do what we did before, just picking up any points you may have from the submitters we've heard from. So this time I'll start from my left with Councillor Edwards.
Yep, and I'll start with the last speaker. Very much interested in the idea of lifting that surfacing off the wharf, if indeed it lightens the load on the piers and preserves its lifetime, because one presumes if worse comes to worse and the long-term plan decision is to demolish a wharf, well, that decking has to come off anyway. So I'd be interested in hearing some more about that.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Interested in the Rotary Club work. That's of the British. That's it.
Councillor Mitchell.
Just in terms of the Hutt Sister City Foundation, I'd be interested to hear what Office's recommendation is in regard to reinstating that funding. I kind of remember when we pulled it a couple of years ago, because of COVID, no one could travel, whether it's worthwhile putting that back in there. Team Nine Trust, curious if there is ongoing funding for the Nine market, seem to be their biggest concern. However, their mention of that reminded me that there was a few different funding streams announced when the Nine pool was closed that were of kind of maybe an optimistic 2 or 3 year time frame. So just curious what is continuing in terms of funding for activation and things in Nine. And yeah, again, really interested in the submission from Rotary around, in particular, the Orchid House and the greenhouse out here, and whether those kind of options for alternate use have been or could be considered.
Councillor Shaw.
Similarly, Redford Gardens, repurposing of 2 buildings, and really keen to see the continuation of that fund for the Sister City Foundation.
Councillor Tupou.
I'm interested in, is there a set of stages, course of action or program of becoming a living wage city, what that looks like in terms of the breakdown, but also in, with Paul Duffin's presentation on the Sister City Foundation. I know it's tough times, it's probably not the time to expand our list of sister cities, but is there intention or capacity in the future to look at other parts, particularly closer to home in the South Pacific, and looking at countries and cities that our citizens have a connection to as well?
I think just on that last piece, that's probably a much broader one that would require basically direction from us rather than, I think, officers. There wouldn't be any work currently or thinking on that, but that could be one for the LTP. So, but I think the first part is one we can get a response on. Councillor Stellinger.
Thank you. Just firstly, following on the questions about sister cities, I'd be keen for a brief update on the status of relationships with the sister and friendly cities we've or have had, not necessarily for this discussion on the annual plan, but a future point. And the other point is in relation to the Cross Valley Link, a bit of advice from officers about the issue of designation. The reason I mention that is I've got a recollection that once upon a time land was designated for that purpose, but it had a time limit. It's not an open-ended thing that was possible, and so it lapsed. So, as I say, just a bit of advice about how that would work if we were to pursue it.
Thank you. Councillor Parkin.
Just echoing basically everything that all the previous councillors have said. I don't need to add anything.
It's a good thing about being on this side when I go that way. Yeah, Councillor Dyer.
I thought everyone was saving me the designation for the district plan, but you stole it from me. So yeah, happy with all those.
Great, excellent. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you. Regarding the preservation of the Gibson Watts Conservatory, investigation on that, and once again on the Sister City Foundation. Thank you.
Councillor Brooke.
Nothing additional.
Deputy Mayor Lewis.
Just adding on to the Heart of the Hutt contribution and the mention of that pathway just missing, not being there, if that could be priced up, and the walkway just to make it, connect. It's having the vision that Rotary mentioned. I'd support what Kerry said. Everyone's touched on everything. I'd also like to know with Naino Trust what support they get from our actual officers through connected communities. And yeah, I agree with the wharf, the concrete, and sister cities as well, support, so everyone's covered everything.
Great, thank you. So we now, everyone's happy with that. We've covered everything from those submissions. Now, if there is anything, I won't put everyone on the spot now, but if there is anything that you're wanting feedback on from the written submissions that we received that obviously didn't present, please feel free just to check through any notes you may have made while going through them, and we can just get those in the following meeting, and some of those we may be able to just kick for the 7th of June. But other than that, we will close this part of the... actually, sorry, one thing I'll technically do, because I, just as a matter of process, so the Eastbourne Community Board speaking time and submission was a late one, so I just moved that the subcommittee accepts the late submission from the Eastbourne Community Board. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Briggs. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Those against no. I declare that carried. Okay, so I will just a moment. Okay. Great. So I'll just close. We won't do a closing karakia because we'll do that for the whole session of the day. But I'll just declare this part of this meeting closed at 2:03 p.m. And we're back at 2:15. Great. Thanks.